Welcome, everyone. My name is Joan Spurl. I'm director of Dolly Parton's Imagination Library for the Literacy Cooperative. We're the local affiliate for the program in Cuyahoga County. The program is now available to every child under the age of 5 in Ohio. In Cuyahoga County, we're at around 50% of the children who are eligible are enrolled. So there's 35,000 children enrolled, 35,000 though still missing out. So we really, I'm one person working to manage the program with some help from my colleagues, like one of whom is managing the Zoom tonight, but really only one full-time person working on this in the county. So I need your help to spread the word in your community, to put, if you would be willing to put flyers up in your community or post on social media, tell everyone you know with children under age 5, this program is for everyone. It's one of the few programs where it really is truly for everyone. We want every child under 5 enrolled. All the children in the family under 5 can be enrolled because they get books selected for their year of birth, and younger children, the second, third, fourth, they deserve to get books and get excited about receiving a book in the mail too. So don't deprive them of that. I was the last of 4 children. So, you know, yeah. They deserve to get mail and get excited about it, even if it's a duplicate copy of a book you might have received, but there are new titles introduced every year. So anyway, please help me spread the word. And I am so happy to be able to share Dr. Gina Robinson with you this evening. She has been a pediatrician for, is it 20 years, 18 years?
24 years.
24 years,
Yeah,
lots of experience.
All right, I have to do the math.
Lots of experience working with and guiding families with children, young developing children. So a lot of information to share. And again, we're so glad you're all here. Dr. Robinson is now at the Cleveland Clinic. But again, she's been doing this for a long time, and we will save time for Q&A. So we're going to let her do the presentation. I can see you're putting your questions in the Q&A. That's great. Later, we're going to have a survey link we're going to put in the chat and ask you at the end of the program to load that up and then fill it out after the program is over, if you're willing and able, please. I'm going to go off camera and mute myself, and then I will come back in for the Q&A and help manage that. And I often, because I'm an early childhood educator, and I often like to share my own little favorite points about child development. So anyway, here we go. Thanks for joining us. Take it away.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be with you again. And I am so excited to talk about toddlers. A lot of times people ask me, what's your favorite age group? And I feel like all of them are my favorite for a different reason, but I do love toddlers. I think they're amazing. I think they're hilarious. I think they're energetic and just all the things. And they can be frustrating and exhausting too. Good thing they're so cute, because then we can forget about the frustrating, exhausting moments. So when I talk about development, especially with toddlers, I think a lot of times people are really caught up on hitting milestones at the exact time, and my child is doing this and this other child is doing that, and what does that mean? And then also almost coming up with a curriculum, like what are we supposed to be teaching our children? I was watching, I was on Instagram, and I saw a video, and there was a dad who was bragging about how he taught his child to walk. And I was like, oh, wow, congratulations, you taught your child to do something that humans have been doing since, you know, we've been around on our own. So I think a lot of times we are so caught up in teaching our children and developing some kind of curriculum, when really every time a toddler interacts with you, with the environment, with their toys, with their books, with their pets, with other people, they're learning, because everything is new. So I'd like to just stress the fact that you don't necessarily have to be so worried about teaching your child letters and numbers and these concrete facts, because those things will come. You may, when you think about how your child is learning language, you're not necessarily teaching your child words, you're just talking to your child, to other people around your child, you're reading books to your child. So they're learning, they're picking things up, even though you're not doing it in some kind of organized fashion or some kind of curriculum. So it's the same thing with all development. So toddlers are going to toddle. They're going to go from crawling to pulling up on the furniture to taking steps holding on to walking, whether or not you do anything. So we want you to encourage that and we want you to support that, but really just helping your child thrive through different experiences is what I want to stress. I think toddlers are a lot of fun, and playing, I'm giving you all permission to play with your children every day and use that play as a way to nurture their development. So I don't want to talk necessarily about milestones at certain ages. I thought maybe we would just talk about all of the things that your child does over this toddler time. Talk a little bit about, I think tantrums are a big concern and a big source of frustration, and just a few things that I think are good tips to have as a parent of a toddler. And then since we already have questions in the Q&A, leave a lot of time at the end for questions so that we can make sure that we hit all of those questions for you. So the first thing is development and toddler. I mean, that the time between 1 and 3, there's an explosion of development. You've got motor development happening. So you're going from crawling to pulling up on furniture to standing alone and walking. Most toddlers will walk around 12 months. That's the average age, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So I always caution parents, don't worry if your child is not walking right at 12 months. Some babies and toddlers take a little bit longer to get there, but I'm also looking for that progression. So I'm more concerned about the toddler who seems to be very far behind or not making any progress towards walking. Most toddlers will walk by 18 months, independently walk by 18 months. So if we're moving towards that walking, that takes a lot of the worry away. So the other thing that happens is with gross motor skills is you go from walking to running, right? Then you're starting to climb. So you're moving not just across horizontally, you're moving vertically and going on different levels. With all of that, you want to allow your toddler room and space to explore, but make sure that it's a safe space. So I think we can go overboard with baby proofing, and you can kind of turn your house into Fort Knox. And then I think it's important for you to have a comfortable place for you to live in your home too. So I try to encourage parents to make kind of safe zones. So instead of locking every single item away, putting everything away, think about your house or your apartment in terms of where is my child going to spend most of their time, and make that place, maybe that's a living room, maybe that's a family room, but then that's the place that you really want to give them a wide, large space to move around freely, that's free of small objects that they could put in their mouths, that's free of cords and like curtain or cords from blinds or electrical cords from lamps or other appliances or things that they can pull. That's free of items that they can reach down and pull down on top of them. That's free of furniture that's not secure. So anything that they could climb on that could potentially topple over on them. So you really want to make that space safe and allow them free reign in that space. So that means they can have their toys there, they can move around there, they can run in that space. You should always be with your toddlers. So I don't recommend leaving them unsupervised, even in that safe space, but at least when they're in that space, you can kind of relax a little bit. The other thing you want to do is make sure that if you have stairs, that they're gated so that your toddler doesn't have easy access to them, or if you can close doors to keep them in certain spaces, do that. Start closing your bathroom doors. I always remind people to do that. Close your bedroom doors so that anywhere, if there's a hallway, the toddler could potentially freely go up and down the hallway, but they can't get into the bathroom, they can't get into the bedroom, they can't get into those spaces unsupervised. Part of this whole being able to roam around freely is the discovery. because like I said, everything that toddlers are doing, they're learning. There's something new and exciting. You can give a toddler a Tupperware bowl and a wooden spoon, and they can find 10 different ways to make noise and make that into an instrument and do all kinds of things with it. So I think allowing them space to explore safely is the key. You can even do that to some degree in kitchens and cooking spaces by locking your cabinets that have cleaning products, but maybe leaving the Tupperware cabinet open. And that can be a space that your toddler can just kind of open that cabinet and go into, take things out. It's a little bit messy, but they're exploring, they're learning. They'll go from the stage where they just want to take everything out to the stage where they want to take things out and put them back in. They might want to put themselves in the cabinet too, if that's possible. But they're learning, they're exploring, they're discovering something new every time they do that. Fine motor skills are developing during this time too. So we've gone from this kind of movement where toddlers are raking things, or babies are raking things with their hands, to more of this pincer grasp where they're able to pick things up with their index finger and thumb. And then as they're getting up to 12 months and up, they're feeding themselves with their hands more. They're starting to, around 15 to 18 months, start to try to use utensils. So you can get some spoons and forks that are made for toddlers for them to start learning how to feed themselves. They are also able to start learning how to use a cup. So that's another skill that takes more fine motor development. As they get to be older toddlers, you start to see scribbling. So you can start to, between 18 months and 24 months, your toddlers might want to take crayons or take a marker and scribble, hopefully just on the paper, but just making those big shapes and back and forth zigzag lines and just coloring, and you'll have all kinds of artwork that you can hang in your house. Let's see what else. I had a thought that just left my head, so I'll come back to that. And then language, right? A lot of people are very concerned about the number of words their toddler says or doesn't say, to the extent that we're even counting words and keeping journals and diaries and really getting stressed about communication, just looking at the number of words that they say. I always like to remind parents that we're not just looking for expressive language, we're looking for receptive language, and we're looking for just communication skills. We're looking for eye contact. We're looking for reactions. We're looking for social interactions. So maybe a little bit of hesitancy in a 12-month-old. And then as they get a little bit older, maybe a little bit more curiosity and a little bit of, once they're reassured that they're in a safe space and their parent is there, a little bit more willingness to interact with other people, making eye contact and really watching what you're doing and looking for your reactions when they're doing things. So we're looking for communication on all of those different levels. And that's not to say that toddlers having words isn't important. So we're looking for those words when you come in for their well visits, but we're also looking at those other things too. Again, you don't really teach your child to talk. You talk to your child, you read to your child, you sing to your child, and they learn how to do that through those interactions. So that's why, you know, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library is just such a wonderful, important thing. I mean, just having a library of this many books. My father always used to tell me, you can never have too many books. And my husband might call me a book hoarder, but again, I don't think there's any such thing as too many. And reading to your child right from infancy all the way through until they start to read to you is a wonderful way to bond and for your child to learn and for you to see that development happening before your eyes. I mentioned the importance of play. And I think we don't, as adults, I think sometimes we forget about how much fun it is to just play, because we've got work, we've got so many serious things going on. But play is not only fun, but it is one of the key ways that children develop. So I actually copied an article that I wanted to just talk to you about a little bit, and just in talking about play and the different categories and the way that we play with children. So one way is object play, and that is when they're taking objects, toys, blocks, cars, various objects and playing with them, sometimes with in the purpose that they were meant to be used, sometimes in a purpose that they weren't meant to be used. But either way, they're interacting with that object and they're gaining something from that, and that is nurturing their development. Physical play, tumbling, kind of running, playing tag a little bit, climbing and jumping off of things. That play, I think, makes a lot of parents nervous, especially if it's rougher play. I have some patients, especially with older siblings, who can be a little rough because they're used to their siblings being rough with them, but that is part of playing. We see that kind of play not just in humans. You see that if you have a litter of puppies, they're rough and tumble. They're kind of nipping at each other. They're trying to get each other, to chase one another around. So that kind of play is just instinctual to all kinds of animals. And again, a very important way to nurture development. Outdoor play, I can't stress that enough, especially in a city like Cleveland where we don't necessarily have great weather. I always encourage my families to get out whenever you can and, layer up and get out in the snow when you can. I'm not a fan of cold weather myself, but it is important to get outside and play, get fresh air, let your child run, let your child touch grass, let your child touch the leaves. A lot of parents get worried that they're going to eat some dirt or they're going to eat a leaf, and they're going to eat some dirt, they're going to eat a leaf, and they're going to be okay because we all did it. But I'm not saying serve it to them, but just don't get too frustrated or too scared about that. Let them explore, let them have fun. Social and pretend play is very important. And that kind of play you start to see in older toddlers where they might start to pretend that they're cooking or might pretend that they're cleaning. You might see a toddler who has a doll or a stuffed animal that they kind of attach to. They might rock that stuffed animal to sleep or pretend to feed it, that they might talk to that stuffed animal. You can see them having conversations with them. So allow them time every day to play, and then play with your kids. Get down there on the floor, get down there on their level. Pretend that you're having the dinner that they've made in their kitchen, and make sure you take time to have conversations with them while you're doing that play. Again, anytime we talk to them, we're helping to nurture the development of their speech and their communications skills. So do all of those things. And plus it's fun. And then you're nurturing development, you're nurturing your child, and you're not, again, following any kind of curriculum, but you're teaching them and you're experiencing that with them. So I was thinking to talk a little bit about important things to know about toddlers. And I think I joke a lot about toddlers being like tiny teenagers because they have all the attitude, they have the willfulness in this tiny little package, and they want what they want. So a lot of times people say, well, how can I get my toddler to do this? And I think they're waiting for me to tell them a way that they're going to convince their toddlers to do things. And I always say, he's probably not just going to go along with it because he doesn't want to do it. So the best thing you can do with a toddler is to have started having routines from infancy. Toddlers do very well with routines and structure. So having kind of a set routine in the morning, we get up, we have breakfast, maybe we have a little bit of playtime, then we have a nap if we're at home. For parents who work, we get up, we have breakfast, we get ready, and then we get out so we can get to the sitter or daycare. Then following a routine throughout the day. We have certain times where we play, we have certain times where we eat, whether that's a snack or a meal. We have certain times where we nap. We have certain times where we take a bath and get ready for bed. It doesn't have to be an elaborate schedule. It doesn't have to be something that's, spelled out or written out to the hour or to the minute every day, but just having that same consistent structure is reassuring for a toddler. And a lot of toddlers don't do well with transitions when they don't know what's going to happen. So that structure, that routine helps them to do better with transitions. So you might find that your days are a little bit smoother when you have a consistent routine. I think it also helps as a parent because parents, whether you work in or out of the home, you've got a lot of things that you need to do as well. If you've got a consistent routine, then you have consistent times during the day where you can do certain things and try to get things done and try to be more organized. Um, Bedtimes, I think, can be a struggle with toddlers. And again, I think that goes back to routines. The best way to have a consistent behavior at bedtime with your toddler is to start before they're a toddler with having a bedtime routine. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be a ceremony. It doesn't have to be 45 minutes long. But if it's 15 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, but it's consistent each day, that's going to help your toddler know, okay, it's time to wind down. This is what we do when we're getting ready to go to bed. A lot of parents struggle with getting toddlers, if they've been co-sleeping, getting them into their spaces. If they are, a lot of toddlers will cry and fight and put up a big fuss if you're trying to move them from one space to the other. So it usually works better if you start your bedtime routine in the toddler's room, in the space where you want them to sleep, whether that's in their room or your room. I am not someone who makes people feel guilty or bad about co-sleeping with toddlers. I don't like co-sleeping with infants because that's a safety issue. So I do believe that infants should be sleeping in their own safe space, whether that's a bassinet or a crib. I don't have a problem with you sleeping with your toddler if you don't have a problem with you sleeping with your toddler. But also, I sympathize with the parent who's had little feet kicking them in the back, or the toddler sleeping horizontally in the bed and taking up more of the bed than they do, and the parents are on the edge of the bed trying, well, clinging on for dear life, not trying not to fall on the floor. So I don't think there's any wrong way to sleep. As far as family bed versus individual bed, I think it's the family's decision. But whatever that decision is, consistency is going to help everyone be happier in the long run. And then also helping your toddler get enough sleep, because a sleepy toddler can be pretty difficult to manage as well. People often ask about tantrums. Tantrums can be very dramatic. They can be almost earth-shattering sometimes. You look at a toddler's face when they're having a tantrum, and it's like they're going through the worst thing in the world and in the history of the world, not just in the world at this moment, but ever to exist, ever to happen since time began. And one way to try to avoid tantrums is to have that routine, to avoid having an overtired toddler. That will help a lot. But also remembering that tantrums are a normal developmental phenomenon. Tantrums come out of sometimes frustration. Toddlers are independent, they're learning all these things, they're doing all these things, and when they can't do those things, it can get very frustrating. Imagine you wanting to do something, but not having the words and the language and the ability to express that. That's a frustrating thing. So some of these tantrums just need to happen, and we can allow them to happen as long as they're happening in a safe way. So of course, if your toddler's somewhere they might fall or fall off of something or bump their head on something, we want you to move them out of that space. But we don't want to have the toddler start using the tantrum as a way to get attention or to get what they want. So we just kind of want to say, okay, have your tantrum. When you're done with that, we'll try and figure out what happened and try to comfort you and make you feel better on the other side of things. I think a mistake a lot of people make with tantrums is they try to explain why the child shouldn't have a tantrum, or why they shouldn't be frustrated. And again, it goes back to my teenager analogy. They don't really want to hear all of that. They just want to have their tantrum, and they want to have the permission kind of to have it. And then I also, if anyone is familiar with the Far Side cartoons, I liken it to the Far Side cartoon where the owner is talking to the dog and they're saying, now Fido, blah, 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 Fido, blah, 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 blah. When your toddler is in the throes of a tantrum, all they're hearing is maybe their name, and they're not really understanding all of the explanation. So sometimes all the talking and the explanation just escalates the tantrum and makes it last longer. Let's see. I think that was really all I wanted to touch on. Again, like I said, I didn't want to get too specific into milestones and when they happen, as much as I wanted to talk about just generally what it's like to have a toddler, some of the things that are frustrating, and then I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions.
Okay, there, I finally got myself
Now it's
unmuted.
okay.
Took about 5 tries to get unmuted. Thank you very much. I just want to let people know we do have previous recordings of programs that we have done, one with Dr. Robinson and others, one particularly on sleep with a sleep expert from Cleveland Clinic. So if some of your questions are related to sleep, we do have a program that we recorded. It's on the Literacy Cooperative's YouTube channel, and we have a page that we will share the link with you for our Healthy Families resource page on our website that has links to all of the recordings of the presentations that we've done so far this year, and then the related resources that practitioners shared with us and or that I helped get and share, because being an early childhood person, I have my resources that I love, my favorites and information. So I'm going to be helping read out the questions, and I won't be able to help myself. I will end up helping to answer some of them too. And as I said at the beginning of the program, and wherever we're doing a program for families, we want to make your life less stressful around development and learning, not more stressful. There's enough stress. And children these early years can be really joyful. They're so innately curious, and they learn best through play, as Dr. Robinson said. Play is learning for them. That's how children learn. They learn just through their everyday routine, getting to explore, and they learn best by interacting with real people and real objects in engaging, meaningful ways, and they can create the engagement and the meaning often themselves if they're just allowed to do it. So let me get to the first question. Oh boy, lots more questions in the Q&A. So
oh wow, it's happened.
yeah,
Huh?
so yeah, and I did say we always talk about the 4 T's: tune in, talk more, take turns, and then as much as you can turn off screens or limit screens, limit background noise, to just, that's the best way to, and reading books is the best way to support their language and literacy development. So someone was concerned about having had screen time, for their little one during the pandemic. Well, yes, that we understand that it's been a really hard time, but as much as you can limit it and save it as a last resort, the American Academy of Pediatrics says no screen time except the kind we're doing right now, like with a loved one before the age of 2, and then limit it to no more than 2 hours every day. So one reason I was answering some of those questions is one of the first questions is one was about how to get their child involved in reading when she's reading books, and then also how can I help we're going to do a program on preschoolers. So one person, now I just realized it was about how to help her 4-year-old retain information like ABCs and numbers. But the answer for that applies to toddlers too. And again, that's just through everyday routines and play, and making it part of what you're doing. You don't have to quiz them. You don't have to do flashcards or, they learn by doing and by you making it part of your day. So that applies to toddlers as well. But Dr. Robinson, what would you like to say too about just helping get a child involved in reading, and then and then I'll go to the other ones.
And I with the screen time too, I think don't be too hard on yourself if you have a child who has gotten used to screens, especially the pandemic babies, because there's what the AAP says you should do, and there's what the textbooks and the child development experts say that you should do, and then there's the reality of your everyday life. And sometimes those things coincide and sometimes they don't. I would start with trying to have a routine. So if you're going to allow your child screen time, maybe do it through having a FaceTime with a family member at a certain time every day. and allowing that to happen on a consistent basis, but then also having a time where the TV is off. And, of course, with any 2-year-old, you do something that they don't like, or you're not giving them what they want. We might get into my last topic, which was the tantrums. Know that that's going to happen because they're not necessarily just going to go along with the program, but trying to distract them with a book or an object when you're trying to transition from screens might help to make that a little bit easier. Toddlers are also on the move and on the go, so they may not want to sit down in the middle of the day to read a book, but if you have that bedtime routine, that's always a good place to add reading into that daily routine. And that might be a way to get them started. I think putting the books on their level. So it doesn't have to be a bookcase, but even a pile of books on the floor, someplace that it's easy for them to get to so that they don't have to climb or reach up to get anything. The books are right there. And getting new books. So that's one of the reasons that the Imagination Library is one of them. Is the reasons it's so great is because they're getting new books every month. So getting new books with different stories, different pictures, that's exciting. Reading to your child and doing the different voices, or maybe making up songs about the story and being really interactive with them while you're reading is also a way to try to get them involved. And don't worry that your 2-year-old doesn't necessarily want to do that now. I always say have a growth mindset when you have children and say, well, my toddler's not doing this yet. My child's not doing this yet. That doesn't mean that they're not going to. That just means up to this point, we haven't done it. This is where we are, but there's room for growth.
And also when your child is playing, say you are in the mood to read a book, say they're playing on the floor near you, you could pick up a book and start reading it and have fun with it. And they're going to be listening and they're going to be absorbing. And they may even eventually just come over and start taking a look and make it joyful, make it cozy, relaxing, joyful, not stressful. Reading books with children should just be a relaxing experience. So don't, like she said, don't put so much pressure on yourself and on your child. You can, they're going to be learning from you, talking to them, narrating the day, bathing them in language, playing around with the sounds of language, rhyming, making up songs, talking about what you're seeing out and about, what they're doing, commenting on what they're doing, counting stairs as you go up and down, counting up, counting down, talking about colors in the world around you, talking about shapes in your apartment or your home, how many look at the square windows, I count 4, all these different ways for you to just incorporate it into your daily routine. That's the best way for young children to be learning. And like Dr. Robinson was saying, just interacting with objects. That's messing around, like filling and dumping. They love filling and dumping, right? Like in the bathtub, you could read to them or sing or, and play. It can happen anytime. So, and so you did cover tantrums because we did have a question about that. Someone was saying that her child is starting to bang his head during tantrums. So she's worried about, she wants to know how to prevent him hurting himself.
Okay. Luckily, toddlers are meant for that head banging. So sometimes that is a soothing or calming maneuver. Sometimes it is a way to get your attention. Sometimes it's just out of their control. They're just so angry that they want to bang their heads. I worry more about toddlers falling from a height and hitting their heads than I do from the toddler who's hitting their head on the floor or banging it on the rails of the crib. They may have a bruise from that. They may have a nice hickey from that. Most toddlers are going to learn pretty quickly that if I hit my head too hard, it hurts, and I don't like that. And they're not going to keep doing it. Or they're doing it to get your reaction to it, not so much with the intention of hurting themselves. So trying to make sure that the space that they're in, having the tantrum, is as safe as you can. If you have a toddler that just likes to fall and bang their head on the floor, trying to pick them up and put them in a crib or a playpen or somewhere where they can't fall over and hurt themselves. But the chances of them causing an injury just from banging their heads on the floor or on the crib rails or something like that is pretty small. It's negligible.
So, you know, one thing, like Dr. Robinson talked about the blah, blah, blah when you're talking, but one thing you can do early on, maybe to prevent a tantrum, or if you see your child's upset, and this is something we as adults really often appreciate, is to do active listening and to reflect back. You're very upset. You know, you're very angry, or that made you angry. You really want that. So just to reflect it back so you understand, they know that you're acknowledging their feelings, because all feelings are okay. It's what we do with them, but it is a natural part of development. Sometimes that little active listening can diffuse things with young children. So, and then again, another question about building a child's confidence with learning educational things. He shuts down if he answers a question wrong about his ABC and numbers and colors. So again, you don't need to worry about quizzing your children or them being able to do that at this time. They're very young. Keep in mind, they've barely been on the planet. They've barely been in existence. I hope you don't mind my saying this, Dr. Robinson, of like chiming in about this question. They are just, they're going to learn with experience. It's going to come. I taught kindergarten for 10 years. Children came in, some of them reading already, some not even knowing many letters, some not knowing how to spell their name. There's a wide range of normal development. Our job is to set a strong foundation, lay a strong foundation of language for them. So the talking and the reading, these are the most important pieces for children before they enter kindergarten, is bathing them in language, reading books with different concepts and vocabulary and stories, use different kind of language. High quality books use, you know, do a lot of the rhyming, and they do a lot of creative things with language. So what reading experts and literacy experts use is this equation. So it's reading, it's language times decoding equals reading comprehension. We know when we multiply, if one thing is small or zero, then the outcome is zero or low. Language times decoding equals reading comprehension. Language is the most important piece in this phase of your child's development, not the decoding. You can play around with the letters and the sounds, talk about them, point out the shapes, but don't put pressure on. My son did not want me focusing on that when he was little, but he did let me read to him for ages. His vocabulary is exceptional because he was exposed to so many different concepts. I fed his curiosity. When he had interests, I went to the library, got more books about those things. We read them, fed his interests, and his language was so strong. So then later, when they're older, when they're ready to decode, the decoding's a bit easier, although it's harder for some people than for others, like children who are dyslexic. But kindergarten and first grade teachers are going to know how to help with that. And so you can make it a game, make it fun. Don't stress about it, please. So I hope that helps with that. And we will do a program on preschoolers too. So let's see.
I would also say, don't equate your child's ability to give you facts with their intelligence or their ability to learn. Sometimes you ask a toddler or a preschooler a question and you know they know what the answer is, they just don't want to say it. So when I'm in my office with toddlers, they never perform, right? They never show me their vocabulary. They never say the words that their parents tell me that they can say on demand. They say them when they want to. If I try to get them to say hi or bye, they won't do it. When I close the door on the way out the room, I hear them say goodbye. So don't equate their ability to give you those facts as as a true measure of what they know and their ability to gain information and learn.
Yeah,
I agree with Joan. Read, bathe them in language, talk to them, narrate your day, sing songs. And you'd be surprised a lot of times that the things they won't do for you when you ask them, when they get into a school setting, they'll do. So we don't necessarily have to worry about those facts right now. We just have to fill that language cup. I don't know if that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, it's a great way to say it. Again, and what I neglected to mention is we are not evolved for reading and writing as human beings. we're evolved for spoken language. So, but the first 2 to 5 years, the first 2 to 3 years of life are the critical window of language development in the brain. And again, that's you doing what we just said, not worrying about letters, the alphabet, and the sounds, except within context, within a fun context of like talking about it or pointing it out. You're setting that strong language foundation. And then when their brain's ready to learn how to read and write, they will have that foundation and they will be able to go with it. But children are not ready to learn how to read and write and often learn their letters even in kindergarten. If you look at what experts say for your expectations for your child at that age, they're only expected to know a few letters and sounds, even at 4 or 5. So there are 10 sounds, and we do want you to play around with the sounds of language and talk about it as they get older, 4 and 5. But just make it part of the fun part of life. And then some people, we need to create the wiring in the brain, and that's how you're doing it. And then some people's brains are harder to wire than others. So anyone who has had difficulty with learning to read, it is not a reflection of their level of intelligence at all. It's just that some brains are different than others. And experts are learning more and more now about how we address those differences and how to deal with them. And school districts should, hopefully be, many are doing things now that weren't done when we were younger. But the most important part is that language part. That's the hardest foundation to build. So, okay, so let's see. A toddler hates her car seat and it's a giant battle to get her in it. Any suggestions to help with this?
That's a hard one because most battles with toddlers, they have already decided that they're going to win. So it can be frustrating, and they're strong too. I mean, trying to wrestle a toddler into a car seat, I feel for you. I've been there, but some things are just non-negotiable. You can't explain it. You can't convince them that it's a good idea for them to be in the car seat and that it's a safe space. So I think that's one of those things that you don't really talk about, you just do. And if it's going to be a battle, you might have to give yourself a few extra minutes before you leave to go somewhere. But I don't have any tips on making it more acceptable for them to get into the car seat. If there is a book or a toy or something that they like that they can have when they get into the seat, that might be a way to kind of help entice them a little bit. That may be a place for you to use your little bit of screen time that we're allowing every day, because a lot of toddlers will sit and watch a cartoon or a show or something, rhyming songs and videos like that while they're in a car seat. So for limiting screen time, let's use it to our advantage. And at the times where we need to try to help them be a little more cooperative and see if that helps.
Yeah, as that last resort in those really tough situations. But like she said, if you could have a toy or a book or something, great. And I had a thought about that. Oh, catch them being good. So when they don't put up a fuss when you're putting them in the car seat, go crazy in giving them some specific praise to say, "Oh my goodness, you got in your what a wonderful job you did. You got in your car seat, so and you helped me. You were mommy's helper. You were daddy's helper." Catch them being good and make note of it, because sometimes when we inadvertently reinforce negative behaviors by drawing attention to them, and we forget to reinforce the positive behaviors that we want to see and that we love. So don't forget to do that. I had to learn that again and again and again as a teacher. So how about a toddler who's afraid of the dark is the next one.
That is, sometimes it's not so much even the dark as it is the separation. So I've seen a lot of parents turn to screens at that time, and I think that's the wrong time to use screens, because the light can be stimulating and that's counterproductive to you getting your child to sleep. I think having some kind of toy, blanket, something that they sleep with to attach to is helpful. I think having a consistent bedtime routine and them knowing that you're nearby, maybe even coming back in after they've been in their room for a few minutes and set a time and say, I'll come back and check on you in a minute, and consistently do that. I think sitting with your child in the dark when you're winding down and getting ready for bed sometimes helps them to be more comfortable. But we also have to think about anxiety, because it can show up in toddlers. And one of the ways that can show up is by them being more fearful than we would expect them to be of certain things. So if you find that your toddler is just really fearful and none of those suggestions are helping, that might be something that you want to discuss with your pediatrician a little bit, do a little bit more in-depth discussion about.
Yes, I always recommend asking for help. And you know, early intervention can make all the difference. Never be shy to ask for some more guidance or help from experts. So one other parent asked about teething. Her 17-month-old has 8 teeth and 3 molars, and it's been rough. Any tips on pain management or how long it lasts? I'm sure that's something a lot of people experience.
And that varies. So some toddlers and infants get teeth and you would never know it, and they don't have any fussiness at all. Some toddlers are really fussy when their teeth are coming in. Some of them are also fussy because they're toddlers and they don't want to go to bed and they don't want to be in their bed. So that all kind of overlaps. So there's no set length of time that it lasts. You shouldn't really need to use medication very often for teething pain, but if it seems intense, you can use some acetaminophen or some ibuprofen for 1 or 2, maybe 3 days in a row at bedtime to try to help soothe the pain. You can do, there are teething rings and things that you can freeze and allow them to chew on. Those are helpful. Sometimes even a washcloth that's wet and something to chew on, it just helps make the gums feel a little bit better. But some of that might also be some toddler behavior kind of spilling over into it. And I think that's something that I would discuss with your pediatrician in a little bit more detail as well.
And the next question is how to correct bad behavior such as biting.
Biting. So I think one thing to do is look at it as developmentally appropriate at certain times, because it is another kind of manifestation of frustration sometimes. So a toddler wants to get your attention. A toddler is maybe wants to express something, but they don't have the words to do it yet. A toddler has learned when they bite you, they get a big reaction and they think that's funny. Most of them aren't doing it to be malicious, and they're not doing it because they want to hurt you. I think that is sometimes hard to remember at that moment because it hurts and you know you've just been bitten. But trying not to have a big reaction to it, a firm no. So if your toddler's in your lap and they bite you, a firm no, and putting them out of your lap for a few seconds because they really want to be with you. They want to be close to you. So if you do that repeatedly, they're going to start to connect the fact that if I bite, then I got to get out of mommy or daddy's lap. I don't like that, so I'm not going to bite. One of the frustrating things with that kind of behavior is that it doesn't happen right away. The correction can take multiple times before you see it have an effect. So being consistent with the way you respond to it is probably the best thing that you can do. Not having a big reaction to it, being firm and just saying no and moving away. If they're biting their siblings or friends, again, no biting, moving them away from those siblings and friends, and then allowing them to come back. But if they go right back and bite, then we got to be ready to move them back out of that situation again. And that repetition will help with time.
And I would like to just add in, I just want to let you all know there were multiple questions in the Q&A about biting. So when she says this is a behavior that happens among toddlers that's developmentally appropriate for a time, it's true. I mean, I'm an early childhood person. Toddler classrooms deal with this every single year. probably multiple times, and they hopefully have guidance to help you with it and articles, and maybe we will try to find one for you that we could share on the resource page later. But another thing that this is an early childhood trick, and something that I've always shared with families is, instead of phrasing things negatively, like what you want children to do, phrase it positively. So instead of saying don't bite or don't, you say the thing that you want them to do. Because when you say the don't, you're not telling them what you do want. So we need to, so say they're climbing on a chair. Instead of saying, don't climb on that chair, you say, put your feet on the floor. If they're biting, you say, instead of don't bite, say, be safe with our bodies. Be safe with my body. Be safe with your friend's body. Let's be safe, you know, and help them create rules. Well, they're too little at toddlerhood. When they get to be older, you can help them. But, you know, you can talk about how you want to feel, but try to phrase things positively. And again, catch them being good. Give them that positive reinforcement for the behavior you want as much as you can, and try to find the positive way to phrase something instead of the don't or stop. Try to tell them what you do want them to do. And let's get to the next one. So, can you share any details about the appropriate ways to transition from bottles to sippy cups? Once my child is 1 year old, do I just drop bottles at breakfast, lunch, and dinner and sit the baby down in the high chair to eat? Or is there a best practice you would recommend?
I recommend starting that process once the child is able to sit independently. So that usually happens around 8 to 9 months. So starting to practice then. And then when we're thinking about nutrition, I always tell patients and parents that between 9 months and 12 months, we're transitioning from the baby getting most of their nutrition from breast milk or formula to them getting most of their nutrition from the foods that they eat. And at that point, if you're transitioning to a cup and you're giving milk or water with meals, it's kind of to go along with the meal. It's not the main part of the meal. So I recommend starting to use a cup between 8 and 9 months, whenever toddler or baby sitting independently. And then when you're transitioning, having your child sitting, you guys sit together for meals, and you give a cup of water or milk with the meal instead of giving the bottle as a meal. I think that is one of the easiest ways to help with that transition. And again, it doesn't have to happen to, you know, at 12 months, you know, midnight on their birthday. So start to introduce that idea even before they turn 1, but really do that transition gradually over those next few weeks after they turn 1. Remember also that when we're talking about milk, whether it's cow's milk or a plant-based milk, they don't need as much milk as they did breast milk or formula, again, because they're getting their nutrition from the foods that they're eating. They're getting calcium and vitamin D and some fat from the milk, but they're not getting all of those vitamins and nutrients that they were getting from the breast milk and the formula. So I think a lot of parents worry that, oh, well, they're not drinking the same amount. That's okay, because hopefully we've also introduced a wide variety of tastes and textures, and they're eating a healthy diet along with you when they sit down at the table with you. And the high chair is fine. A chair that comes right up to the table is, you know, whatever works for your family and your dining room or your kitchen or wherever you're having your meals. But I think the most important thing is for them to be, you guys to be sitting down at mealtime, being a part, something that you enjoy together, because then you're also having conversation. You can play, you know, sing songs, you can play some silly games, you can do all of those things. And again, we're nurturing development while we're sitting down for meals together.
Great. Boy, there are a lot more questions, and I'm just going to ask my colleague, Mercedes, are you able to share the save the questions for me? I don't know if they get saved in Zoom, but if we don't get to all of them, I want us to make sure we address them in future programs, and or with resources we share, or even an email that we send, where we get other people to help answer them. But hoping we're kind of covering a lot of this. For a 13-month-old who won't allow the parent to brush or wipe gums, she now has 9 teeth. Can you provide any suggestions for oral care? Thanks.
So at that age, you should be brushing twice a day. You should be using some toothpaste that has fluoride in it, at least, or one of those times. And you don't need very much because a lot of toddlers want to eat all of the toothpaste. So a strip that's the size of a grain of rice won't be too much fluoride, even if they eat all of it. Many toddlers, I will say most, I won't generalize, but many toddlers don't like to have their teeth brushed, but they also don't like to have their diapers changed. They don't like to have their clothes put on it. So it just goes along in the list of things that they don't want to do simply because they don't want to do it. And they don't understand, they're not going to understand the importance of it. So I encourage parents to bring the toddlers into the bathroom with them. And maybe while you're brushing your teeth, you give your toddler their toothbrush, they get to brush a little bit, but then at some point you may have to pick them up and actually get in there and brush and clean their teeth off. That might involve a little bit of restraint, but there's no other way to really do it. I have had a conversation with pediatric dentists and or had conversations with pediatric dentists about this thing and this very thing. They're parents too. And so you think, well, you're a pediatric dentist, you're the expert, you must have the trick. And repeatedly, the answer has been, you hold them, brush their teeth, let them go. So try to let them do it some, try to give them some independence and autonomy, but then you just kind of get in there, get it done. They only have 9 teeth. You don't need to brush for 2 minutes like we do as adults. 30 minutes, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, that should do it.
Thank you. So another question about TV time. But best programs, youngest they should watch is 20 minutes every other day for an 18-month-old. All right. So I'll just quickly say, I recommend PBS Kids. So, and again, you know, we're trying to make it to 2 years and older before we do that kind of screen time. But I would say only 20 minutes every other day. Okay. For an 18-month-old, you know, like that's really limiting it. That's, again, try to control it, control the quality and the quantity as much as you can. And keep in mind that educational programs that say they're educational aren't necessarily, but PBS, I do trust. They have the best of intentions. They're not trying to addict your child or get a profit off of them, like a lot of things. So, and they really do try to make quality programming. So that's what I recommend. And then how about trying to what's the best way to deal with toddlers that are very independent and sometimes try to do things they're not ready to do, such as walk downstairs?
Mm-hmm. I would say try to allow them their independence while keeping them safe. So a lot of times they're not ready to do something, but it doesn't mean that they can't learn how to do it in a safe way. Teaching them maybe to turn around and come down the steps on their stomachs instead of trying to walk down the steps. Worst case scenario or last resort, just block the steps off and block things off so that they don't have access to them, because they might keep going to that thing that's not safe. So if you really can't figure out a safe supervised way to allow them to learn how to do that skill just yet, then maybe try to limit their access to it.
I'm just typing one answer that I can do. Okay. How, one was wondering, okay, so I hope we answered a couple of these questions about other things you can do besides reading to help a 2-year-old get a head start with learning and developing. So hopefully you were here. And then how to get my 2-year-old to answer to their name is another one. We addressed a lot of these. When should they be concerned with development such as speech? I'm putting these together because I'm thinking you might be able to address those. But
so play, definitely play is a great way to get your 2 and 3 month olds. And by playing at 2 and 3 months, you're just smiling at them. You're making faces, you're making sounds, you're playing peekaboo. That is play at that age. So just having fun in that way is a way to start and to nurture that development at that age. A 2-year-old who's not answering to their name. So I think that I would need some more specifics. So is this a child who's ignoring you? and answering some of the time, but not answering when they're engrossed or involved in another activity? Is this a child who doesn't seem to be hearing you and doesn't seem to be hearing other sounds? Or is this a child who doesn't answer to their name at all? So the answer to the question kind of depends on which one of those scenarios we're talking about, because the average 2-year-old should be able to answer to their name. Whether they want to answer to their name all the time, that's a different question. So I would say talk to your pediatrician about that one, because I think you need to give a little bit more detail in order to get the best answer, and then figure out what we should be doing next, if it's a concern, if it's just a stubborn toddler who doesn't answer because they're ignoring you.
Let's see. I think you already addressed the car seat thing. I'm hoping, yeah, there's some people, one child who just always cries in the car. There are going to be some things where some kids just, I think, yeah, they might.
No matter what you do, they're going to be mad. Yeah. And one day they're probably just going to stop, and you're going to wonder, well, what did I do? And it's not that you did anything. It's just that they've decided to give up.
Yeah, some are maybe more sensitive to some things than others too, right?
And that special toy or that special book, or like I said, since we're limiting our screen time, saving it for those times in the car, that might be the answer for that.
Right. And there's great books like with Lip the Flap books, or cloth books that might have different features. So if you can maybe try to bring activities along for them to hold in the car seat, maybe even put one in the car seat that might be intriguing to them, surprise them with something, even a plastic cup or a scarf or a little things can get them interested. Someone was asking how to get a 1.5-year-old to understand and follow commands. So I feel like some of what we're talking about is hopefully talking about their developmental stage, and just I always like to say they've barely been in existence. They've barely been on the planet. They are just learning. There's so much development still to go, but I'm going to let Dr. Robinson take a shot at that.
And I think that one kind of relates to the 2-year-old that's not responding to their name. That's a similar kind of answer. So is this a 1.5-year-old who you say, go and get your shoes, and they look at you and they don't want to do it and they just keep doing what they're doing? Or is this a 1.5-year-old who doesn't understand what you want them to do? So that one I would discuss with your pediatrician, because most 1.5-year-olds can follow some simple directions and understand. Sometimes it's just a matter of showing them what you want them to do. So
just doing it together.
Right. And then just kind of modeling it, and then, okay, I do it, then next time maybe you do it. When I was a resident, it was see one, and then do one, and then teach one for procedures. So you see someone do it the first time, then you do it yourself the next time, and the next thing you're teaching. So I think your toddler's seeing you do it, and then you do it together, and then maybe they're ready to do it on their own.
Okay, I want to make sure I get back to this other question later, but a lot of questions about weaning, recommendations for weaning, what limits are recommended, how to transition from nursing to sleep to going to sleep without nursing. I'm going to say a few of them at once, so that how to take away the pacifier. Should I take the pacifier away? She only needs it at nap and bedtime. Is there a recommended time to end breastfeeding? I'm planning at 1 to 2 years.
Lots of questions. I'm excited that everybody's so involved.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. We may have to have a part 2.
We might have to have a toddler part 2 before we even do the preschool discussion. So breastfeeding, we want you to do it for the first year at least, but do you have to stop at a year? No. So some toddlers will nurse usually less frequently, but they will nurse up until age 2, or sometimes even beyond that. But 1 is where we want you to make it. We try to support you and get you to that 12-month point. But when you're ready and your toddler's ready, that's the answer to when is it time to wean. Weaning can be difficult because there's some toddlers who just decide, I'm done, I don't want to do this. There are some toddlers who will never stop unless you kind of force them to stop. So I'm trying to do it at certain times because they're not really doing it for nutrition in a toddler age group. They're doing it more for comfort. So maybe making it something that you do at certain times of the day or in a certain chair or a certain space. So it's a comforting activity, but it's not something that they're using all the time as their only comfort. What were the other questions? There were so many all at once.
So about a pacifier and when to take it away. Child needs it just at nap and bedtime.
Okay. So I don't argue too much with a toddler who only uses a pacifier at nap and bedtime. I recommend leaving it in the crib, leaving it in that space, kind of out of sight, out of mind, because a lot of times you'll notice that when they see it, they want it. It's more of a habit at this point. Ideally, if you can start weaning it away around 6 months, that sometimes makes the transition easier. But I would recommend leaving it in the crib and leaving it in that space so that's only used in that space, and seeing if that works.
And then how guidance from and are you willing, sorry, we've gone past an hour, I just realized.
Oh,
but
okay.
I don't mind, but we are down to 45. We had lots of participants, and I think an hour is a limit for some folks. So I don't even know if some of these folks who ask these questions are still on. I'm thinking maybe, yes, someone just said, can you please do a part 2? I think if you're willing, Dr. Robinson,
Well,
we might
if
need
you-
to, and or
I was
like
thinking maybe if you
maybe even not live, but like we could do a little session with you later that we just
to answer all the
record.
questions.
Yeah, then we don't have to, it's a little easier on us. We don't have but where we have you answer the questions. I ask you and we answer, so then we have 2 parts to the video for the questions we haven't answered yet.
Yeah,
I'm
I'd be
going to ask
happy to
my
do
colleague
that.
what she thinks of that idea, because it's over an hour and people are, they need to get their sleep, and
Time to get that bedtime routine going.
yeah, maybe what we can do right now, since I don't think we can finish all of these, I'm going to reinforce asking your pediatrician for help or assistance. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to get help. I have a master's in early childhood education. I taught kindergarten for 10 years, Head Start, preschooler. I took care of babies as a nanny and toddlers. I needed to ask for help sometimes. So, and I never hesitated to. If you have questions, no question is off limit. This is not an easy job. And not everyone got the training I got. I have a master's and I still needed help. I have a friend who has a PhD in developmental psychology, and she's a baby expert, and she needed help with her children sometimes. So we'll do a part 2, but bathe your child in language, tune in, talk more, take turns. You are the best gift for your child. They love your attention. Patience with yourself, give yourself grace, give your child some grace. Catch them being
play.
good. Reinforce play. Children learn best by interacting with real objects and real people. Young children don't need to be drilled at all. They just need opportunities to practice stuff, to experiment. So whether it's drawing, scribbling, when they learned how to walk, they had to first roll, crawl, roll over, maybe pull themselves up a little, then crawl, then toddle and fall, and then walk along furniture. For everything they're learning, they have to have these experiences that lead them up to it. It's step by step by step, right? Dr. Robinson, like it doesn't all happen at once, and there's so little. There's just so much growth and learning to do. So just take a deep breath. There's a wide range of normal development. If you have concerns, ask your pediatrician.
Keep that growth mindset. Your child may not be doing it yet, That's the key word.
Yes, and if somehow, say we don't answer your question in part 2 that we do, you can feel free to email your questions to me to include at jspurl@literacycooperative.org. So let me put that in the chat or real quick. Well, you all have to know how to reach me. Or you can email my colleague who sends the emails from all of us. We're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat. Lots of thank yous.
Oh,
So
good. I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it.
yes, and we'll do our best with the part 2 because Dr. Robinson is very generous with her time. We will be doing a program about preschoolers, 3 to 5-year-olds, next month with Dr. Robinson. So for those of you who have children that age or are anticipating your children getting to that age and wanting to learn more in advance, planning ahead, we will welcome you there. So I want to just thank Dr. Robinson again for your expertise and your wonderful, gentle way of sharing it with families. I'm sure it's a big comfort to folks, and thanks all for joining us. So we will work on that part 2.
Have a good night.
All right. Good night. Bye.